Spoiler alert, we're not going to be talking about the movie Dreamcatcher in this video because, well, if you've seen it, you know why.
I said it!
Hello everybody and welcome back to the Horror Movie Syllabus. My name is Professor Victor and I'll be your host as we go through all of the essential, noteworthy, interesting, and notorious modern horror films. If you're new to the channel, I recommend you check out our introduction video. There's a link to that in the description below and it's going to give you a pretty good sense of what we do here at the Horror Movie Syllabus. In short, we look at a particular subgenre of horror and then we pick 3 movies from that subgenre to explore, but this is our Doctorate Level series. This is where I revisit a video that we've already done before, a subgenre that we've already explored, and then I take a review of that and then look at a new 4th Doctorate Level selection. Something a little bit more deeper cut, something a little bit more obscure, or just maybe something that just needs a little bit more love. Maybe not so deep cut, but just needs a little bit more love, isn't as mainstream as some of the other movies. And that's what we're doing today with the Stephen King movie subgenre, Stephen King horror movies. Now, as pretty much everybody knows, Stephen King is a horror novelist, probably the most prolific horror novelist of all time, very famous, and he's a very prolific writer, and that's led to a proliferation of his movies based on his works. Lots of movies based on his work, and we've talked about many of them, not just in our previous Stephen King video, but across bunches of subgenres, because he has a lot of different movies that fit in different subgenres, and there's a lot of great stuff to talk about. That said, my relationship with King is a little bit hit and miss. I talked about this in the previous video, that I sometimes I love his work, sometimes not so much, and then a lot of times it's kind of in the middle, and sometimes he can't stick the landings with his writing, and sometimes the movies follow suit. There are some classic movies, and we've talked about those in the channel. There are some ones not so classic, and a lot of those we've skipped. Some of them we have talked about on the channel because they're sometimes still notorious or whatever, but the highs can be very low for Stephen King. The lows can be very low for Stephen King. Sometimes it can still be fun, but there's a lot of tropes that we talked about in Stephen King, stuff about, writers in Maine tend to be his focus for his stories. And there's always a lot of 50 style greaser villains. We talked about all this in the previous video. And a lot of it tied into the movies that we were going to look at for the Stephen King subgenre. And we picked 3 really good ones, really solid ones that we hadn't talked about in other subgenres. We wanted to focus on them. We gave them their own video to highlight them. And we're going to go ahead and recap the ones we talked about right now. The first movie that we talked about in our Stephen King horror movie video was 1408. And 1408 was a short story by Stephen King that was fleshed out into a full-length feature film, which can sometimes be a problem, but in this case, they did a really good job of building a mystery out of it and making it a pretty compelling story that warranted a full running time of a movie. And fortunately, they had John Cusack in the lead role, and he does a great job carrying this film because the entire movie is taking place in one area, one location, a hotel room, and he's got to carry the whole movie by himself. He's doing all the heavy lifting by himself. So it's really a testament to his skills that the movie winds up being as good as it is. It's a well-made movie. It's paced really well. It has a really cool concept or story behind it, and it does a really good job of just keeping you tied into it, even though again it's kind of limited in terms of its scope and its presence, and it's one location. But it's a movie that doesn't seem like it gets enough love. It really doesn't seem to be remembered with all the other Stephen King movies that are really good. It gets kind of forgotten, even though everybody who's seen it seems to give it a lot of love. They seem to really like it. It's got a bit of a cult following, but it doesn't get enough shine, so we wanted to give it some shine here on the channel. And the next Stephen King horror film we talked about was The Mist. And The Mist was based on a Stephen King novella, and it was adapted by Frank Darabont, who's had some luck doing some Stephen King adaptations in the past with Shawshank Redemption, Green Mile. So he knows his way around a King novel. And this one is a really good job of zeroing in on the themes of King's work in terms of a paranoia and divisiveness when a group of people are confronted with something that's pretty life-threatening or life-altering, and how the different factions can turn on one another. A large part of the movie is rooted into that paranoia, and that's where a lot of the horror and fear comes from. Unfortunately, we talked about the CGI aspect of this and how it's not really up to snuff, and so the monsters, when you see them, don't necessarily wind up looking so good because they kind of look a little cartoonish, but all of that is forgiven because the thing that people remember about this movie, the reason why it's so popular, the reason why people love it, is that bleak ending. I'm not going to spoil it. I didn't spoil it in the video. I'm not going to spoil it here. But that bleak ending really does a number. It's not the same as the King story, and even King admits it's better, and it is. It really had a lot of nerve and makes for one of the most memorable endings in a horror movie, and makes the movie incredibly bleak, incredibly dark, and much more than the sum of its parts. And the last Stephen King horror movie we talked about was Carrie. And Carrie is a bona fide classic based on the Stephen King novel of the same name and directed by legendary director Brian De Palma. I'm a De Palma fan, and so I love this movie. Sissy Spacek in the starring role as Carrie, just doing an incredible, memorable performance. And then Piper Laurie as her mom, her abusive mom. And we talked about how the abuse of that relationship kind of underscores Carrie's situation and makes us sympathize with her, even when she starts doing really terrible things and when her powers start to manifest. We're on her side. We want to see things go her way because we've seen her be victimized, not just by her mother, but by her classmates. And we talked about the stellar cast of this movie with John Travolta and Amy Irving and PJ Soles, and how everybody's bringing their A game. We talked a little bit about the ending of the movie and how it's a bit of a cliche now, but at the time it really stood out. The jump scares at the end of the movie really worked, and they've become a memorable thing that everybody talks about and emulates to this day forward. We talked a little bit about the franchise, the sequel, the remakes, and I actually have some love for all of those, but they're nowhere near as good as the original, because the original, again, bona fide classic, killer direction, killer performance, killer source material, made for an absolute must-see movie. So if you haven't seen it, you definitely needed to check this one out. So that's going to do it for our recap of the previous video, and now it's time to look at our new doctorate level selection. Our doctorate level selection for the Stephen King horror movies is Gerald's Game. Gerald's Game came out in 2017 and is based on the 1992 novel by Stephen King of the same name, and was directed by Mike Flanagan, the Flan Man, the savior of modern horror. We love Mike Flanagan here at the channel. Talked about many of his movies. We'll probably end up talking about all of his movies, frankly. And we talked about Stephen King adaptations he's done before. We talked about Dr. Sleep very recently in this channel. So we love what the Flan Man can do. When he's got some Stephen King source material, he does a really good job of adapting it. And that's definitely true here too. No difference here. He's adapted the hell out of this novel. Now, if you haven't seen it before, the movie is about a husband and wife couple that take a trip to the wilderness, to the woods, to a house they have out in the countryside in a secluded area, in an effort to rekindle their marriage a little bit, have a little bit of a romantic weekend getaway. And then they decide to have a kinky game where husband decides to handcuff the wife to the bed for some sexy time. Only he suffers a heart attack and dies, and she finds out that she's trapped on this bed. She can't get herself out. Nobody's there to save her, and hijinks abound as she tries to figure out how to survive. And I'm going to stop there so as not spoil the movie for you, but this movie does a really good job of adapting the novel. Now, I haven't read the novel, but I read a little bit of a synopsis for this video, and it seems like they really nailed a lot of the stuff that apparently, again, reading reviews and stuff of this movie, this novel was thought to be unfilmable because of the way it's so psychological and how so much of it happens in one location and is kind of interior monologues. And they found a really good way to adapt that cinematically. Mike Flanagan, leave it to him to figure out a way to solve this and give it an emotional depth that it really warranted, it really deserved. He crushes it here. He's aided by a really strong cast. Mike Flanagan, if you follow his career, he tends to use a lot of the same actors over and over, the Flan Man crew, if you will, and he's got them working here. His stars are Carla Gugino and Bruce Greenwood, and Carla Gugino carrying this movie. She's doing the bulk of the work. She is the one who is the main star and having the internal monologue and having to figure out how to solve these problems and live, and she's crushing it. She's really carrying this. She is a grossly underrated actor. She does not get the credit she deserves, and she's got her following, she's got her fans that love her, but she should be a huge star, and she's not for some reason. And she is incredibly talented, and she's showing off all those talents here. Bruce Greenwood doing really great work. He's always solid. He's always a dependable actor, and he's doing really great work here. He's kind of the unlikable husband, and he's nailing that role, and he adds a certain layer to this that it kind of makes you want to punch him in a way, and that's great because that's effective for the movie. The two of them playing off each other really, really well in this movie. And then you've got some minor roles for supporting cast. You got Henry Thomas and of course Kate Siegel, Flanagan's wife, and they are doing really good work in these small supporting roles and flashbacks and things like that to flesh out the story. And that story is what's really working here. See, Stephen King's got a very strong premise here. This idea of being trapped in this bed and you can't get yourself out, and you're going to die if you don't. You're going to starve to death or dehydrate to death, or maybe somebody's going to come and do something bad to you, but there's nobody to help you and you're stuck there. And, it taps into this feeling of claustrophobia. I've got a touch of the claustrophobia, so I can feel that when she literally can't move herself off the bed. That's disconcerting, man. Like, that's upsetting to me, the idea of just being that physically restrained. So you've already got that going for the movie, and that alone is just kind of ratcheting up the tension quite a bit. That, this psychological horror just gets really ramped up by that feeling of claustrophobia, that feeling of tension of you can't get out, you're stuck. And then it goes deeper. And admittedly, it sounds like the book goes deeper in this way too, but it starts to really explore her trauma, her childhood trauma, and how that's affected her adult life, and how it's affected her marriage, and just how she's lived, and how she's never really faced it before, and she's kind of forced to face it now while she's alone and stuck with her thoughts. And it's an interesting way to explore trauma and abuse. And there's lots of trigger warnings for this movie. If you're sensitive, maybe look at doesthedogdie.com first to just check to see, because some of the stuff in here pretty uncomfortable to talk about, some pretty upsetting, disturbing stuff here. It's done rather tastefully, it's addressed rather tastefully in the movie, but it's still pretty dark and sensitive subject matter that gets explored. This movie doesn't shy away from it. It really is digging into it, and it's letting Carla Gugino act her butt off, really, just to kind of like delve into the psychological aspect of her character and how it's led her to this situation that she's in now. And the self-doubt and the guilt, and then the anger, and then the drive to survive. All of these emotions that she's teasing out and tackling. It's a wonderful performance, and it's a wonderfully, masterfully done script to affect these psychological aspects of the book that I do agree that would be really hard to figure out how to film, but Flanagan solved it. Like he solved the problems with Dr. Sleep, he solves the problems here too. His directing is top notch here. He's not as flashy or showy in this one as he has in some of his other works, or in works by other directors for that matter. But he does a really good job of setting things up and setting up the scene so that things play out later. His camera work is wonderful here. Again, it's mostly one spot, one space, and he makes it feel dynamic. He makes it feel interesting. He edits this movie in such a way that it feels kinetic and energetic, even though it's technically kind of languid and stationary. He does a really good job of infusing energy into this movie, and he's again aided by Carla Gugino and Bruce Greenwood, and they're doing great work, and he's drawing those performances out of them, and they're carrying the movie. All of this stuff has come together really well. He's also having fun in this movie too. Like, he's got these fun Stephen King references to like Cujo and Bag of Bones. And speaking of Cujo, there's a dog in this movie, and they're very nice to the dog, and then that goes someplace I didn't see it going. I really didn't see that one coming, but that was a nice touch to add another layer of tension to the movie. It's a great adaptation. Like, if I was to quibble about it, the inclusion of the Moonlight Man, Carol Strachan's character in the movie, is a weird one. He's in the book too, apparently, and maybe this one wasn't quite the right fit, because it feels like it doesn't fit in with the story. You've got this really tight psychological drama going on, and then you've got this really creepy character in there that is, this ghostly giant of a character who's misshapen and stuff like that, and carrying his bag of bones, and it's a weird fit. And then the movie, as the movie goes on, it kind of revisits that, and it kind of seems like it takes away from the emotional trauma aspect of the movie that we're focused on, and kind of goes in a slightly different direction. Although I think the ending is kind of good on that, but it's a weird choice. I think I would have cut it out, but I guess sometimes you can be a little too faithful of an adaptation to a King work, and maybe that's the case here. But it's not a big problem. It doesn't derail the movie too much, and the critics agree with me. Like, the movie is very well reviewed. It was made for Netflix, so it's not like you can really track the box office of this or anything like that. But it got really good reviews, and everybody who seems to have seen it really likes it. But kind of like 1408, it does seem like it kind of gets ignored. People don't talk about it as much when they talk about great Stephen King movies. They don't talk about this one, which is why I wanted to talk about it here. I wanted to highlight it because it's a really great Stephen King adaptation, and it's done a really good job of making a really compelling hour and 45-minute movie out of a premise that is really great, but seems kind of like short-sighted. Like, how much can you make this work? Turns out quite a bit, and you can really tell a fantastic tale as long as you've got Mike Flanagan at the helm, and that's what I think is the main thing that makes this movie work. If you haven't seen it, highly recommend you check it out. Great film, great Stephen King adaptation, great action performances, just everything pretty much across the board. Like I said, some nitpicks on some of the adaptation being a little too faithful, but other than that, I think this movie is great. So if you haven't seen it, check it out. And if you have seen it, let me know if you think it's great too, because I like to be confirmed. But if you have a different opinion, let us know in the comments. So that was our doctorate level selection for the Stephen King horror film subgenre. But I've also got an extra credit movie to talk about because I really like this movie and I wanted to talk about it. And it came out very recently. The extra credit movie we're talking about today is The Monkey. And The Monkey came out in 2025, just a couple months ago as of the time of this recording, and is directed by Osgood Perkins. And if you know Oz Perkins, you know that his movies are great and they are usually very introspective and contemplative and dark and serious. But this one's very different. This one's funny and gory and it's having a good time. And I had a good time watching it, so we were going to talk about it. First, if you haven't seen it before, the story is about twin brothers who find this toy monkey that is left over in their belongings of their father who's abandoned them. And they find that when you turn the key on the monkey, he drums. And when he drums, somebody dies. And they find that this power is very dangerous. So they try to get rid of the monkey. But of course, he comes back and there's all kinds of bad hijinks that are happening. But it also ends up being an interesting contemplation on the absurdity and randomness and unavoidability of death. So it gets really deep, but it also stays really, really funny and really, really gory. But I'm going to stop there so as to not spoil the movie any more than that, other than to say that this movie is very, very different in what we're expecting from Oz Perkins. Like I was saying, a lot of his movies are usually a little bit more contemplative and serious, and this one, it's gory comedy. It's really a different side of Oz Perkins, and I think it's a great thing to see. It's great to see him do something very different and to show a different side of himself. And it is a side of himself. Now, Oz Perkins has come out and said himself that his movies tend to be very deeply personal based on his upbringing and his life. And if you don't know, he was the son of Anthony Perkins, the star of Psycho. And so both of his parents died when he was young. And it really is an interesting thing to see him kind of working out his own family traumas and stuff like that in his work. And there's no exception here. His movie is very black humor. And I didn't realize how dark his comedic sensibilities are. Now, we've seen some of it before, like in Long Legs and stuff like that. We've seen flashes of this, but this movie is reveling in it. It's reveling in his pitch black humor, and it's reveling in his affinity for ridiculous gore. This movie's been compared to Final Destination, and when I came out of the theater, I thought that too. And I don't know if I said that in my YouTube short when I did a YouTube short on it, but I did think that there was like very much like Final Destination, just like ridiculous fun, like Rube Goldbergian style kills, where it's like, how are these people going to die? And they're kind of played for laughs as much as they are for shock and scares and gore. And it's very, very effective. It's a lot of fun. Oz Perkins has a very wicked sensibility, and he is just gleefully murdering people in this movie, but at the same time he's also still exploring these themes that he's got interest in. He's exploring the fractured family and themes of abandonment and how it affects people, young boys specifically, and how they can grow up and be a little bit, or a lot affected by that upbringing. And it is really kind of confronting this idea of how absurd death is, and the idea that it really is inevitable and it happens to everybody, and how once you realize how random and unavoidable death is, you are able to kind of coexist with it well and kind of relieve yourself of that anxiety. And it's like a freeing aspect or something like that. It really is an interesting dissertation. And I'll be honest with you, some of this I got from reading interviews and stuff like that after the fact, but some of it I actually did pick up on the movie. I did feel like it was delivering the themes in a way that wasn't obtuse, that I was able to grasp this idea. Like their mother, the boy's mother in the movie, really nails this home at some point where she's talking about how everybody dies. It's very bleak and it's like kind of funny because you're like, why would you tell this to your kids at a funeral? But at the same time, it's kind of conveying to you the themes of the movie and the message of the movie in a very effective way. And it lets you realize, or at least let me realize, this movie is not just a slapstick gore comedy. It's got something to say. It's just doing it in a very fun way. It's taking you for a ride, but it's also telling you, hey, I've got some thoughts about death. And they're kind of dark, but we're going to also just laugh and have a good time while we go through these. And it's a very personal movie in a way, even though you wouldn't think it to look at the trailer or to watch the movie even. You might miss the fact that it's so deeply personal to Oz Perkins, but also so universally relevant because all of us confront death, all of us have lost loved ones or will lose loved ones. And so it really is an effective way of delivering a message in a fun way. Now he's aided by some really strong performances. Theo James in the dual role as both brothers, the adult version of both brothers, is doing a great job of kind of a deadpan delivery, but also just kind of letting the tension kind of work its way through there. And then it's got a lot of other actors who are doing good. Where Tatiana Maslany is in there. Adam Scott's got a small performance, but Elijah Wood is the scene stealer. He's only got a couple scenes, but he's absolutely hysterical here. Technically miscast, but he crushes it, so it's hilarious. And it's just kind of really making clear or underscoring that this movie's just trying to have fun. It's not taking itself too seriously, despite the serious underlying themes and subject matter. It's doing a really good job. Now, this is one that I have read before. This is a short story in Skeleton Crew, and I've read that, but it's been a couple decades since I've read that, so I don't remember it super well. But I did recognize some of the things were different. Like the most obvious one is that the monkey's a drummer in this movie, whereas I think it's a cymbals in the short story. And I think the stories, the characters in the story are a little different. Like I don't think it's twin brothers. I think it's just one brother in the story. And some of the events are a little different. The ending is very, very different. And if there's a knock on this movie, I would say, and I've seen some people say this, that the third act of the movie maybe loses a little bit of steam. I don't think that's false. I don't think that's incorrect. I do think it maybe loses a little bit of steam, but I do think that the very end of the movie, the final moments of the movie are pretty great. And I think that kind of pulls it out of those doldrums a little bit. And so I think it sticks the landing or ends on a high note for me. So I'm still really into it, but it's a great movie and it got really solid reviews. It was a modest hit. It wasn't a massive hit, but it was a modest hit. It made its money back and then some. And it did. It showed a new side to Oz Perkins. It showed that he's a versatile director who can do different things and not just make the same kind of movie over and over again. I love the movies he makes. I'm fine if he does them over and over again, but I'm also excited that he can do something very, very different. And I thought he did a great job here. The themes of the movie really resonate for me. The comedy really resonated for me. The gore really resonated for me. I had a really good time with this movie, and I like that it's deeper than just surface level stuff. It's a little deeper than, say, Final Destination, but it's as fun as a Final Destination movie, and that works for me like gangbusters. Did it work for you too? I know a lot of you saw this movie. It was pretty popular. Let me know in the comments what you thought of it. I'm pretty high on it. Not everybody is, but I think that overall most people liked this one a lot or enjoyed it at least. And if you haven't seen it, I'd definitely say give it a try. Like again, it's a bit gory, so there's that. But other than that, I think it's a fun ride. I think it's got a lot of good comedy in it. I think that the performances work really well, and I think the themes are really interesting. So I think there's a lot we're going for this movie, and I definitely recommend it for you to check out. So that's going to do it for our revisiting of the Stephen King horror film subgenre. These are a couple banger movies. These are both really, really enjoyable, really, really good. Definitely worth your time. So if you haven't seen them, check them out and let me know what you think, of course. But right now we're going to go ahead and dig into a horror Trivial Pursuit card. This is where I read a card live on camera and try to answer the trivia question, hopefully without getting it wrong and embarrassing myself. And since Gerald's Game is really like a psychological horror movie, we're going to go with the psychological category on the card. And I swear to you, I don't plan these out. I pull a card before I start filming. I don't read the card in advance. I read it here live on camera for the first time. And this is fortuitous. This is serendipity, because here's the question. In 1989's Pet Sematary, what type of vehicle hits Gage Creed on the highway near the family house? And if you're familiar with Pet Sematary, if you've seen it, you definitely know the answer to this. Even if you haven't seen it, if you've seen like the trailer or just know kind of anything about the movie, you probably know the answer to this. But I'm not even mad at this question being a little bit on the easy side, because I just love that we got a Stephen King trivia question on the Stephen King horror film Doctorate Level video. That's just fantastic. That makes me super duper happy. I do know the answer to this question. I'm guessing a lot of you do too. We did cover Pet Sematary on the channel. Against my better judgment, I'm not a Pet Sematary fan. I talked about this in the video. I don't like the movie. I think that it's kind of cheesy and feels like a TV movie. I do like the little kid playing Gage though, but like I've never read the book. I think the book's probably better, but like this movie, it doesn't hit for me. It's not a really good one, and so I'm not a huge fan of it. I almost didn't cover it for the channel, but it's so popular. I think people a little younger than me that saw this as a child, it resonates for them. It was scary for them. It hits for them. And I respect that. And so I'm like, you know what? Got to talk about it. It's got the notoriety and it's got the following for it that we had to talk about it. So we did talk about it. And hey, man, if you love it, great. Good for you. I don't love it, but I can understand why some people would. Like, I can understand why some of the scenes would be scarier had I been a little younger when I saw it for the first time. But that's enough prattling on this one. The question is, what kind of vehicle hits Gage in the movie? And I'm going to answer my question. You're going to lock in your answer. Lock it in. My answer is, of course, a semi-truck. He gets obliterated by a semi-truck when he's trying to chase a kite or whatever, and they just flatten him. It's fantastic. Best part of the movie, frankly. And let's just check the card to see if I'm right. It says a truck. A truck. So I think my answer was a little bit more complete than that, but okay, fair enough. So easy question, I thought. So was it easy for you? Did you get it right? And if you didn't get it right, what did you answer? Let me know those wrong answers because I think they're funny. If sometimes they're funny. Anyways, that's going to do it for now. We will probably talk about more Stephen King in the future because, like I said, his movies pop up in all kinds of subgenres. So there's a good chance that we haven't seen the last of Stephen King. But we're going to go ahead and cut this video off here. Thank you very much for sticking around to the end. I really appreciate you. And until next week, I'm just going to say class dismissed.